Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Factory of the Future. I'm here with A.W. Schultz. Today, we're going to be doing a bit of a debrief after our recent guest interviews on the show. So, if you guys missed it, we had Drew Allen on the show a couple episodes ago, and most recently, Rosemary Coates. So, Drew is energy by nature. So, we talked a lot about the energy supply here in the U.S. And Rosemary is a supply chain expert specializing in offshoring manufacturing as well as bringing some manufacturing back to the US. So today, AW and I are going to debrief and distill some of the major takeaways we got out of those interviews and hopefully leave you guys with a little food for thought about intended consequences and unintended consequences of the current state of affairs here in manufacturing and supply chain issues. So I'll kick it off with this, AW. I know we had three topics today to really dive into. Number one, the energy situation here in the US. Number two, the kind of stagnation that's occurred with corporations here domestically and leaders with their decision making as a result of these drastically increased tariffs. And then I believe last but not least is the workforce shortage and how that factors into sort of what we believe were the intended consequences of these tariffs. So let's start out with energy. I know you had a really great conversation with Drew, and what was even more reassuring was that Rosemary, independent of Drew's commentary, had shared the same concerns about the energy supply in the US, how that's currently being eaten up by the servers and the data farms that are popping up seemingly every other day here in the US, and how that impacts the ability to bring manufacturing back to the US as was intended by the current policy and the imposed tariff. So go for it.
I just want to start with a quick story that after Rosemary's conversation, I kind of digested a little bit further. And back earlier in my career, I was working for a bottling company, and we had opened this huge factory in just outside Tulsa, and it was state of the art, gonna supply all. Tulsa's right in the middle of the United States, right? So distribution is really good for trailers and all the other things and railways and etc. But we didn't get it launched outright, and all of a sudden it's 2008, and we hit the bubble, and we had to make some changes. So we ended up shutting that plant down,
Whoa.
and it was meant to be like a super factory.
Ugh.
Shut it down. And then a couple of years later, I find out while I'm driving through the city, and it's got the word Google on it. And they turned it into
Server farm or
a
server
server
house.
farm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it's a big building, but I remember like, okay, well, we had a lot of cooling towers, and we had a
Mm,
lot of area we could cool things down. Like, so it
yeah.
actually was a perfect place for it.
Yeah.
And for that, that's an example of what kind of where we're seeing like the the architecture of where the US is going is like these data farms are coming up everywhere. And
Yep.
but the manufacturing jobs are not coming back. So real life example is we're talking about lots of jobs, tariffs going into place. Today is we're recording this on August 1st. So this is the first day of the Trump administration's tariffs that are going into effect. And what we don't know is probably when this airs or what's going to happen, what's going on.
Yeah.
And what Rosemary was talking about when she was interviewing all these executives is that what are they going to do? They're not going
Nothing.
to do anything. They're going to sit idle.
Yep.
And if you talk about continuous improvement, the one thing you don't do is do nothing.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, to me, it was just like, man, that couldn't be farther from the intended, uh, outcomes of what was appeared to be, an effort to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. I think to your point about what Rosemary contributed was, yes, we want jobs we want more manufacturing and skilled labor here in the US, but what we don't have any intentions of bringing back and what doesn't make sense from a cost perspective for the consumer or the corporation is those unskilled labor jobs, the textile industry and things of that nature. That's the stuff that we still want to keep offshores. And with the data center specific, my friend, that's his like bread and butter. That's what he does. He builds data centers for Meta, Google, etc.
Yeah.
And you're spot on with the cooling requirements, the temperature control requirements, the machinery involved is just insane. And the space required is just more than probably the average human would guess. So as I think about that, I really see that this tariff situation is not necessarily supporting those scenarios, right? Because now all of a sudden manufacturing jobs and space is going to be in competition with the server factory or farms or whatever you want to call them. And the US workforce is known for being more of a skilled, educated, high level, even at you think about a union apprentice and craftsman. They're the best in the world at what they do, and it's because of the training and the skills that they acquire on the job and through their training, their technical training. That's not the same caliber of worker that's going to be building, making a bunch of t-shirts that you can get for $10 at Target. Rosemary cited the Halloween costume example of just wanting to simply order a $25 Halloween costume. Now, I understand the sentiment there. However, one thing I am going to share, and this is kind of outside of what we discussed talking today, but it's hit my brain, so I have to share it. The only reason that I do support higher cost for those, call it fast fashion items, those disposable textiles, is because that's a major issue with regards to like landfills. Like, I really do believe that as US consumers, we've been pretty negligent in ordering and buying all these one-off, one-use Halloween costumes and these, clothing items that we are basically disposable clothing. And where are those things landing? They're landing in other countries, and it's just creating a landfill that breeds disease and is just simply not good for the environment. So I think those two things are a little bit either in competition or aligned, depending on your view with that, right? Because by charging the customer $50 for what they would normally think nothing of spending 25 on a disposable Halloween costume, it might open up the opportunity in the door for some unique toy sharing slash costume sharing businesses. Like I've seen, actually, I want to say somewhere in Texas, there's this like nonprofit that like takes toys in and like it's a warehouse and like you can shop for toys and then drop off toys. So instead of just buying continuous plastic and then throwing it out or recycling it and landing it in the landfill, people are actually using these toys and kind of creating this toy library, if you will. And I could see a future in which we do that with costumes if the tariffs continue to pose this challenge and this question for the consumer. So totally off track, but
Well, it's funny. We're talking about textiles, and the first industrial revolution was surrounded around textiles.
right.
The idea of manufacturing fabrics and the idea of harnessing that power. And then when we talk about Industrial 5.0 is sustainability. And now we're trying to find ways to do with some of these textiles. And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen a couple, I haven't seen, but there's theories about, one of the problems is that you can't break the materials down. Like you got zippers and buttons and things like that. There's a lot of manual labor that goes into it. And like when you said, they get shipped off overseas
Mm-hmm.
because the U.S. is known for, we've got a lot more automation and more technical um, manufacturing. And that's just the facts of it. And textiles it's a big gap as far as waste. And I don't have a good solution. And don't go in my closet because I'm not leading by example. Um,
So in moving, so for those of the audience who doesn't know, I've been bopping around the country a little bit, so to speak. I listed my house on Airbnb in Wisconsin, and then I moved down to Florida here for a month. And so with moving to Florida, I've obviously chosen a significantly pared down wardrobe, and it's been really exciting for me. Because I've always had this like minimalist interest and like minimalist tendencies. I've lived in like a 300 or 400 square foot apartment. And it's when you pare things down, it really gets interesting, I would say, to see what you actually can live with, versus maybe what you think you need. So then it offers the opportunity to buy higher quality goods and pieces that you just have less of. And that last a much longer time. But that's more on a sustainability topic. So going back to the tariffs and the intended versus unintended consequences, it brings me to a conversation I had yesterday with a client of mine, one of the global leaders in colors and pigments, and it's really quite crippling what's happening with these tariffs. He described it like a 8-digit impact. And I know where the manufacturing company that I work for, I would be surprised if it's only eight, considering especially we just recently acquired a steel plant in Mexico, which was supposed to be a great cost savings to us. Well, guess what? Now with the tariffs, you could pretty much consider that reversed into a loss in a bunch of ways, I'm sure. But I think that's one thing that's really kind of sad when you think about it. Like the whole idea was, let's bring manufacturing back to the US. We don't have the energy. That's not going to happen. We don't have the workforce that wants to do those jobs. I think, I don't know. I'm not somebody who, despite my background, works in a factory. I'm a computer jockey. Um, and then you factor in also this stagnant nature and position that the CEOs are taking of these large companies. It's having the opposite effect. They're not investing in manufacturing here. They're battening down the hatches. They're not doing continuous improvement, like you said. They're restricting their investment budget because those funds that would be invested are now going to, foot the tariff bill that they've got to pay. So I think the other conversation we wanted to have that relates to that is this long runway, right? Like it's not like we had all these factories just turnkey ready for these companies if they wanted to mass migrate back to the US. We don't have that. And I think if there is a positive impact to be had, I don't think we'll see it for 3 to 5 years. I think even at best case scenario, if even some portion of the manufacturing was returned to the US, it's going to take 3 to 5 years minimum for these companies to mobilize and get that manufacturing back here. So what do you think goes into that? I know you've had a little bit different experience. You talked about smart factory in Tulsa. Like what's the runway what's a time frame, a realistic time frame for an organization to look at moving a factory? Topic of
You
concern
know,
or topic of
I'm
mind here?
I'm no expert on this, but I can tell you this. It was a couple years ago. This is back in the Biden administration,
Okay.
and this is this company that they did a lot with computer softwares, but and I remember talking with them, and I also talked to another company that they do they were in the oil and gas,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about they're not going to do anything either because they don't know what's the EPA, what the regulations are going to be under the Biden administration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we got another 180, and there's a lot of stagnant that seems like going on right now. And I
So yeah,
don't
go ahead.
know.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No,
cut you
that's a
off.
lot. That's my thought on it.
So it's interesting that you bring that up because this is something we see a lot at the consulting firm I work with, right? So we hear of these, this constant political pendulum swing within the US and how that really does cripple manufacturing, cripple the kind of leaders in corporations, right? You could even talk about the impact it's having on social media companies and tech companies, the political swings that it seems like everybody's just bouncing back from one end to the other, and just spending one year, reversing everything they did last year, but on a 4-year cycle, right? Um, what we're seeing at the consulting firm is that really these decisions are being made with the consumer in mind and based on the consumer demand, right? So less so, like Europe is more driven by regulations. The
Yeah.
US is driven significantly more by consumer demand. So
Yes.
going back to the Halloween costume, right? If we as consumers are making conscientious decisions to purchase more sustainable textiles, more sustainable products, all these things, like I buy biodegradable dog poop bags because it really infuriates me the idea that how many millions of people are picking up their dog's poop, putting it in a plastic bag, and then instead of that, going back and re-nurturing the soil because that's how the ecosystem works. It's just sitting in plastic, and now the microplastics are going into the soil versus the nutrients that create this symbiotic relationship, right? So one of my consumer choices is to buy biodegradable dog poop bags. And I try to think about that in every facet of my purchasing. I think more people could benefit from having that state of mind, and it doesn't need to be politicized, right? I think we all have a vested interest in making sure that we have a clean place to live, that we leave behind hopefully the world a little bit better than it was when we got in here. And if not, we're cleaning the mess that's been left by our predecessors. And I think a lot of that had to do with like, it's kind of like this excitement of something new. And I think that's what we saw for the last 50, 60 years with the industrial boom. And maybe you could talk a little bit. That's probably why we're transitioning from industry 4.0 to 5.0. But there was just this excitement, and then plastic came in, and you look back at the history of plastic, and in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was the greatest thing ever. I was reading Malcolm Gladwell's What the Dog Saw. I think that's the name of the book. And he talked about linoleum and how it was the biggest, best thing ever at one point, right? Like, so we got really excited, but then it's almost like we overcommitted, and now we've got this giant mess. And now it's this generation, call it Gen X and down, who's tasked with, not that boomers aren't, but boomers I think are just slightly less concerned with it for a number of reasons, on the general, not to overgeneralize, but where the next generations really have to be thinking forward about how do we clean up this mess, and how do we create a future that's more sustainable and with the earth in mind. So um go for
Yeah.
it. What do you got to say about that?
I wish I had a better answer, but as long as we're still addicted to oil, plastics is a byproduct of it. And it was
Yeah.
probably a good idea when they found all these ideas to do with plastics, but now we've got this other problem that we've created. Uh, but I don't see the problem going away. I'm going to say in my lifetime. I'm going to
I
say
have to I have to ask a question. I don't know this. I should know this. Well, I'd like to know this. Do you know if silicone is also a byproduct of oil?
is silicone a byproduct of oil?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it'd be interesting. Like, I feel like that's one of those like just pivots we could make as a consumer. Like, I know my best friend, she has two twins, and the twins for their entire lifetime, I don't think have ever consumed anything out of plastic, off of plastic, using plastic. So they've only had glass bottles, which my late grandma bought. She contributed some glass baby bottles that were silicone wrapped. Um, to the babies. The babies have silicone bowls and spoons and all the rest of it. So I think if the consumer is looking for one simple pivot, one simple change, go from plastic to silicone, right? Because I don't know that there's ever going to be a world in which we completely get rid of oil as within this economy and our consumerism. But I think if we just change the preference from plastic to silicone, we can have at least less toxins coming into our body, and then have less concerns about all that downstream. So that could be a potential. Just pivot, so it's like taking the same circumstance but just choosing the better option.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for a
And
consumer
there's a lot of different
standpoint.
options out there.
Yeah.
But going back to Rosemary and Alan's interviews. It was eye-opening because we often talk about people and processes and we haven't really dove into the global standpoints on it, and this kind of really opened our eyes to it. So we wanted to take a chance to just reconnect with the conversation we had with those two fantastic guests we had on recently.
Yeah, yeah. And I think after having the guests on, initially we were a little apprehensive when we first started building out what does this podcast look like. And then over time, we've sort of warmed up to or opened up to the idea of having guests. And I think we're definitely welcome to having guests in the future. So if you're interested in talking about anything manufacturing, sustainability, Industry 4.0, tech transformation,
Yeah.
any change management and all the things that are in and around those topics, please feel free to reach out to us because we are open for business and we are welcoming guests on the show going forward here because it definitely is great to have other experts share these insights. And AW, great differentiation or distinction, I should say, on how we are really, in the episodes previous, we've been focused really on the micro. And in bringing the guests on, it opened our field of vision to more macro
Yes.
factors that we can consider when we're talking about manufacturing and global supply chain. So great distinction there.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think this is a good area to come to a close, right?
Clocking out. I'm clocking out, boss.
Locking out like finished goods. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.